Oh, that has lagged. All right. Well, I currently have 0 people on. All right. I'm not sure how that's working exactly. Hi, Anna. Hey. All right. Oh, that's weird. Why is it saying that I have 0 people watching then? Okay, I'm gonna give it a second. The technology is always weird to me, probably because I am incapable of making it work properly. Iona, are you still here? If you're still here, could you send me another message just so I know? Um, hey, Chad.
Yeah, but
Um, are you using the internet for that?
or what?
Are you using the internet for that?
Yes.
Is there any way
No, sorry, no.
Okay. Oh, okay, great. Thanks, Iona. Um, okay. Oh, I have 3 people watching. Okay, so things are catching up. I'm sorry, guys, for the lag. You can just skip past this when you review in the future. All right, so today I am going to talk about the classical civilizations, period 2. Again, that is 600 BCE to 600 CE. And I was hoping that I would have I guess I can, I was looking for a PowerPoint, but I guess the PowerPoint I made like a million years ago will have to do. So I'm going to talk through this. I'm going to go through my PowerPoint. And if you have any questions, let me know. If you need me to stop at any point, let me know. And I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. Okay, so just kind of going to set the stage for period 2. Like I said, 600 BCE to 600 CE. This is the first time period where we're going to see these big empires. In period 1, humanity is really still just getting on its feet. We've just started farming. We're starting to settle down. We're not hunting gathering anymore. We're settling in these farming communities, and over time, these farming communities are going to become villages and then significant like river valley civilizations. So if you remember, those are those places like Egypt, Mesopotamia, the Yellow River Valley, the Indus Valley civilizations. And while they're going to be powerful and they're definitely going to expand in power, it's not going to be until period 2 that we're going to have big empires emerging. And so again, just to clarify what an empire is, because that's really important. An empire is a society, it's a state where one country, one government, one state goes out and conquers other territories. And it brings them onto their jurisdiction, into their control. So the actual definition of an empire is an extensive group of states or countries under a single ruler. And usually that single ruler is an emperor or an empress. And so that definition is going to get a little funky when we talk about Rome, because the state of Rome will expand and become an empire before what we call the Roman Empire exists. So Rome is going to have 2 phases, a republic and an empire. But even as early as the republic, it's going to meet the other definitions of empire in that it will be going out and conquering territory. They will be taking over former independent states. But it's not until they get an emperor and Julius Caesar and then his nephew Augustus Caesar that we get what is called an empire. It's funky. I'm sorry. So we have the rise of these new larger states in period 2, and they go out and they conquer territory. They win battles. Emperors or powerful leaders consolidate their control. These empires are going to start to trade with each other. We're going to get international and long-distance trade for the first time. And religions are really going to start to spread and blossom during this time. We're going to get the beginnings of the major world religions, many of the major world religions. Christianity is going to start during this time. Buddhism is going to start during this time. Confucianism is going to start during this time. And with religions that existed prior to this, you're going to see them really being written down for the first time. So prior to this, we did have religions like Judaism and Hinduism, but we're not going to get the sacred texts of Judaism and Hinduism until period 2. So this is a big period for religion. This is a big period for the beginnings of international trade, the beginnings of empires. All of this is really going to be the foundation for everything that happens in periods 3 through 6. So in terms of the actual AP test, this is about 15% of the test. That plus period 1 will make up 20%. Odds are also really good that you're not going to have to worry about an essay for this part, just because of the way the AP test is going to work this year. So I'll just cover that really. I'm going to get into content. So the way the test is going to work is when you get to your short answer questions, you will not have any short answer questions for period 1 or 2. You will have 2 short answer questions that may be from periods 3, 4, 5, or 6. And then you have to do question 1 and question 2. And then you have question 3 and question 4, which you can choose from. Question 3 may be period 1, 2, or 3. Question 4 may be period 4, 5, or 6. So I should take back what I said a second ago. You may write to a short answer question for period 2, but you don't have to. And then for the essay, your DBQ will be on periods 3, 4, 5, or 6. So your DBQ will not be from period 2. And for your long essay question, you have 3 prompt options. Option 1 will be from periods 1 or 2. Option 2 will be from periods 3 or 4. And option 3 will be from periods 5 or 6. So you could definitely go through this entire AP test with minimal knowledge about the classical civilizations. So I'm not going to spend too much time on the classical civilizations, just because periods 1 and 2, again, like, you could pretty easily get through this exam without dealing with them too much. Yes, Asher. You don't get to choose multiple choice. You don't get to choose with the first 2 short answer questions. You must do question 1 and question 2 on the short answer, and you don't get a choice with the DBQ. But you do get a choice between the last 2 possible short answer questions. You only write 1. You pick out of the 2 that they give you, and then you get a choice with your long essay question. So some choice. They are trying to make this a little bit more user-friendly. All right, so I'm going to start with, let's see, we're going to start with ancient Greece, if that's cool with you guys. So ancient Greece is going to be one of the earlier major civilizations that develops in period 2. And there's a couple of stages for ancient Greece. So when we talk about the ancient Greeks, the first time we're gonna really talk about them is in the what we call the Hellenistic. Nope, sorry, that word came out. The Golden Age of the ancient Greek city-states. So what you should know about the ancient Greeks before Alexander the Great is that they exist in city-states. They're one of those historical civilizations that has that interesting sort of political structure. The Maya are also going to be city-states. The Swahili coast is also going to be city-states. So you're going to have that example popping up now and again throughout history. And city-states are just kind of exactly what it sounds like. They're cities that are little teeny tiny kingdoms. They might have a king or an emperor, not an emperor, but they might have a king or a dictator. They might have a democracy like Athens will have. Sparta is actually going to have 2 kings ruling at the same time. So each different Greek city-state is going to have a different political structure, but they're totally independent. There's no single ruler of Greece in the early stages of ancient Greek history. It is all going to be dependent on the actual independent civilization that we're talking about, or the independent city-state that we're talking about. And that's largely because of the geography of Greece. Greece is very rocky. Greece is very mountainous. It's hard to traverse through like land. And so as Greece is developing, it's just a lot easier for the Greeks to maintain independence locally. It's very hard for one single ruler to control the entire Greek isthmus. So it's kind of like how interaction with the environment is going to affect political and social structures. So Athens and Sparta are going to be your two big city-states. And again, like I mentioned, Athens is going to be a democracy, although when we talk about it, it's not a pure democracy in the way we think of. And Sparta is going to be a kingdom that has two kings ruling at the same time, so that one may go off to war while the other can stay home and rule. So Euala, you're going to have the DBQ, and then you're going to have one essay. But you have 3 essay prompts, and you pick one to write to. So you'll do the DBQ first, and you'll have an hour for that, and that you don't have a choice with. But then after you do the DBQ, you will have an option of 3 different prompts, and you pick one of them, and you write to that. And you will have 40 minutes to write that second essay. I hope that clarifies that. So with Athens, they go through a series of different types of governments, and by the 5th century BCE, they have a democracy kind of established. So the way that the democracy works in Athens is that all of the free land-holding men... Oh, it was a strategy move, Asher. It was so that, like, one king... You might have typed that question before I answered, but it was so that if they had a war or something, you could have one king go off, and then another king could stay back and still maintain order. So with the Athenian democracy, the way it works is that basically all of the free land-holding men in the town who are citizens of Athens are allowed to vote directly on issues such as, do we go to war? Do we raise taxes? Who do we want to lead us through this next little bit of our society? Do we want to kick this person out of our society and force them into exile? And so anytime that a vote needed to come up, you would vote with a stone, essentially, and you would have a black colored stone or a white colored stone, and then you literally just like physically put the stone in the proper basket, and the number of baskets that had the most stones would decide which decision we took. So it was direct vote. It was definitely probably the most representative government that we're going to have for a long time in world history, because it's not a king or an emperor or like a pharaoh telling you what to do. It's the actual citizens of this city-state voting. But of course, women can't vote, slaves can't vote, and anyone who's not a citizen of Athens but might be living in Athens for trade purposes or whatever, they can't vote either. So only a very small minority of people can vote in Athens. So that's just kind of a difference. Again, Sparta is much more militaristic. They're going to have a kingdom. Athens is going to be where more of the culture of ancient Greece comes out of. We think of the philosophy, we think of the mythology, we think of the art and the drama and the literature that comes out of ancient Greece, the pottery. Most of that's going to be from Athens or other city-states. Not a lot of it's going to come from Sparta. Sparta is Spartan, and the word we use, Spartan, when we use the word Spartan today, we usually mean that it's something that doesn't have a lot of frills. So if I lived in like a Spartan dormitory, it would just be like a bed. Uh-oh. My internet seems to be kicking in and out. If you could comment and let me know if you can still see this. My internet just did a funky thing, so I want to make sure that I'm not talking and losing you guys. That's the one downside of doing reviews at home. All right. let me see if anyone's messaging me on Schoology to say that it's okay. Sorry, guys. Thanks for letting me know. Cool. Okay. Um, so again, when we talk about Sparta, they had very few frills. They were a tough guy, militaristic society where everything revolved around training for the army and training for battle. Their society and the Athenian society ran on slavery, but especially the Spartan society. When all of the free men were going off to war or training in battle, it really was the women of the society and the slaves of the society that kept the other things up and running. So they kept trade going, they kept the industries going, they kept just your farms running and the temples running and things like that. So the downside to that is that Sparta is a very slave-heavy society. The upside to that is that women are going to get some more freedom in Sparta than they will in Athens. Athenian society was extremely restrictive for women. Women weren't allowed out of the home except for like on festival days or unless they were too poor to have their fathers or husbands like sequester them. They had to wear veils when they left the home. If you compared ancient Athens to like modern day Afghanistan in terms of women's rights, you wouldn't be far off. Spartan women, because they were expected to be healthy and physically strong to give birth to babies that would be strong and, future soldiers, and because, their husbands and fathers were always off in the military, living in the barracks, fighting wars and things, they had a lot more freedom in society. They were encouraged to be physically fit, to engage in like foot races and physical training. They were able to work outside of the homes a lot. So when we talk about like gender roles, Spartan women are going to have a lot more freedom, not only than Athenian women, but then a lot of women in society at this point. All right, so we're going to have, let's see. I'm just trying to see, okay, so when we talk about the culture of ancient Greece, obviously I think a lot of you guys are familiar with the Greek mythology, the Greek gods and goddesses, Zeus, Hera, Athena, Apollo, all of those cool guys and girls. When we talk about ancient Greek philosophy, though, and those of you who are doing your shower curtains have probably come across like Greco-Roman philosophy, that's talking about the actual philosophers that come around the time of Pericles and beyond, Pericles and later. So Pericles is a guy, he lived around like 494 to 429 BCE, like the golden age of Greece at this time. And this is around the same time that we're going to have philosophers like Socrates, Plato, Aristotle. And if you're wanting to remember them in that order, it is Socrates, Plato, Aristotle. Chronologically, it's SPA. And they're going to question the reality of the universe. They're going to be some of the first people to really try to apply reason and logic to science and to, human behavior and to the nature of our existence. So people like Socrates are going to constantly question everything. Socrates is famous for driving people nuts, asking like, how do you know what you know? Like, how do you really know that you know that? That's where we get the Socratic method from. You're going to have other Greeks, like mathematicians, scientists, people like Archimedes, who are going to try to kind of begin the scientific method and measure like the world around us. So we talk about like Greco-Roman philosophy. It really does start with the Greeks. The Romans are going to pick up a lot of this and carry it on and continue using it in their societies as well. So when I get to the Greco-Roman, when I get to the Roman part, just remember that the Romans steal a lot of their culture from the Greeks. They steal their philosophy from the Greeks. They steal the gods from the Greeks. They're going to improve on Greek science and technology. Oh, here comes my cat. So just keep that in mind. But the Greeks are also going to have different kinds of culture. They're going to have drama. They're going to be some of the first playwrights. They're going to compose a lot of beautiful lyric poetry. They're going to have some pretty cool architecture like the Parthenon in Athens. So definitely let's remember the Greeks. The Greeks are going to they're going to go to war with the Persians first. So I'm going to hop over and talk about Persia really fast. That's my cat. Her name is TARDIS. She's a good girl. So the Persians, the Persian Empire, there's a couple of leaders you'll need to know. The first major emperor of the Persians is called Cyrus the Great. He really like pulls the Persian people together in what is now modern day like Turkey, that area of like we call Southwest Asia or like the Middle East. The Persians are very organized. They've got a fantastic military, and their political system is very well organized. So the Persian emperor is going to create things called satraps, satraps, that are basically like little provinces. And the governor of each province is going to be called a satrapy. And this is just a really great way to organize the bureaucracy of Persia so that the Persian emperor knows that even though he's got all of this territory he's got to control, it's divided up into smaller chunks, and each smaller chunk is ruled by someone he trusts and someone that he knows will do what he wants to do. So these satraps will collect taxes, they will provide soldiers to the military, they'll keep law and order. So they're like tiny little kingdoms that all answer to the larger emperor. Oh boy. All right, you're stepping on my computer now. That's not acceptable. Sorry. Sorry, guys. Okay, there we go. Let's go. Sorry about that. So the Persian rulers are going to be very, very powerful. They're going to call themselves the kings. A Persian emperor would be called the king of kings because of how many other little kingdoms they would have conquered and ruled over. And so a lot of people will later use that phrase to describe like Jesus Christ. The Persians did have a lot of mercenaries. Now, not as many as like 300 might want you to think, the movie 300. Most of their military is going to come from just the kingdoms that they conquer and their different provinces that they rule over. But they will also use some mercenaries. So the Persians are going to have a pretty actually like socially tolerant society. The Persian kings did what affect their economy? I'm not sure what you're asking, Francisco, if you could just clarify that. The Persian kings are going to conquer a lot of people that have a very different religion than their religion is. The official Persian religion was Zoroastrianism, which was kind of the precursor to Judaism in a lot of ways, and we'll talk about that and perhaps in a later video. But Zoroastrianism wasn't widely practiced outside of the native Persian people. And so the kings of Persia were open to allowing people that they conquered to continue practicing their faith. It was a really good method to keep people happy because if you make someone convert, sorry, my cat is being an absolute nutto right now. Oh, no. I mean, honestly, most of the mercenaries are not, it's not going to be a widespread mercenary thing. It's not going to be a huge burden on their taxes or anything like that. The Persians are going to allow people to continue practicing the religions that they practiced before they were conquered. The Romans are going to do this too. And it's really beneficial to these large empires to be religiously tolerant because as long as the religions that people are practicing aren't undermining your rule as an emperor, letting people have that and keep that part of their heritage makes them a lot more willing to submit to your rule. So that was definitely a strategic move. Also, like the Roman emperors are going to do, like the Chinese emperors are going to do, the Persian emperors are going to draw a lot of relationships between them and the gods. Samuel, that's an interesting question. Persecution, the way we think about it, every society back then was going to have persecution by modern standards. It was a rough life living in the classical times. Punishments were very severe for any minor infractions. That was how they like kept rule, like the rule of law up in times where things could have been a little more chaotic. But by classical standards, no, the Persians were pretty merciful. Now, if you rebelled against them or you know, undermined their authority, then yes, like they would crack down on you extremely hard. So would the Romans, so would any empire at this time. But as long as you kept your head down, you did what you were supposed to do, they actually treated their citizens really well. The Persian kings that you need to know other than Cyrus, really the big one after Cyrus in terms of needing to know would be Darius the Great. I'm sorry, not Darius, just Darius. So Darius is known because he is going to rule over the empire at its height. He's going to be the Persian emperor who kind of consolidates the laws and puts one single legal code over all of Persia. He's also going to be the one who sends troops to punish the Greeks for rebelling against the Persians. And so Darius is going to start that Greco-Persian war that his son, Xerxes, will finish by losing. Actually, just to go back really quickly to Cyrus, the founder of the Persian Empire, he is called Cyrus the Great. He also has the title of Messiah. So that was just kind of an interesting term for a non-Jew. But the Jews give the Persian Emperor Cyrus the title of Messiah, or anointed one. In the Bible, he's the only non-Jew or non-Israelite to get that title because he was so tolerant to the Jewish people who were living in exile in Persia at this time. And actually, I mean, I guess to just talk about it now, while the Hebrew people were living in exile in Persia under Cyrus the Great, a lot of historians think that they picked up themes from Zoroastrianism that they would later write down in what would become the Torah, or the what Christians would call the Old Testament. So these themes of like good versus evil, one powerful good deity versus a powerful bad deity, and this cosmic struggle for like good versus evil. So the Persian Empire, as we know about it, as we're going to think about it for period 2, is actually going to go through a couple of different phases. So the most famous dynasty in the Persian Empire is the Achaemenid dynasty. It's spelled Achaemenid. That is that's a dynasty that has Cyrus the Great, Xerxes, Darius, those people. It started in 550 BCE, and let me see if I can find, and it ends in 330 BCE. So that one runs for about 200 years. The next Persian Empire that we're going to talk about is the Sasanian Empire. Well, actually, okay. Okay, so for the Achaemenids, who are the main Persians, 550 to 330. Then they're going to be toppled, and they're going to be ruled by the Parthians. And you only need to know the Parthians because they kind of help out with some of the Silk Road trade during this time. So they play along with the Silk Roads. Then Alexander the Great's going to come along. Actually, and then we're going to have the Sasanian Empire. So I'm making this more complicated than it needs to be. I don't want to weird you guys out. Focus on the Achaemenid Empire, 550 to 330. There will be other smaller empires that come about after the Achaemenid Empire, but I'm making a big hot mess of that, and they're details that I do not think are going to be necessary. Me too, Timothy. Me too. You're also going to have a series of huge building projects under people like Cyrus the Great and Darius. They're going to build a series of roads they're going to build a series of roads across their empire. They're going to build beautiful temples. They're going to have actually a great mail system, like MAIL system, to get news and stuff around the empire really effectively. So all of that is good to know. Let's see. So yeah, the Greco-Persian Wars are going to happen. The Greeks are going to win. That happens around like 499 to 449 BCE. So a little bit after, well, again, with like Darius and then with Xerxes. So I'm just pulling up. I'm just trying to make sure I don't miss anything with you guys. So after the Persian Wars, just to hop back to ancient Greece for a second, after they defeat the Persians, so the mail system was kind of a let me see if I can, Persian royal mail system. It was on the royal road system that they used, and it was a courier system, so they used horses, kind of like how the Mongols did, to travel as quickly as possible from one end of the road to the other to get the news where they needed to get it. And actually, the Persian road system was described by a Greek historian, Herodotus, saying, "There's nothing in the world that travels faster than these Persian couriers." He said, "Neither snow nor rain nor heat nor gloom of night stays these couriers from the swift completion of their appointed rounds," which is often today, it's kind of like the stagecoach or like Pony Express. Or similar to the YAM system that the Mongols are going to use. And that is actually the description Herodotus used, snow nor rain nor heat nor gloom, blah, 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 is kind of the unofficial creed of our postal service. So that's kind of a cool link to modern times. All right, so again, after the Greeks win the Greco-Persian Wars, think like the Battle of Marathon, the Battle of 300, which actually they lose that one, but they win the ultimate war. The two powers that really emerge on the Greek isthmus are the Athenians and the Spartans. And the Athenians create what is called the Delian League as a way of trying, arguably, they say they create the Delian League to protect Greece from future invasions from Persia or any other enemies. But ancient Athens kind of quickly turns the Delian League into a clique that they have total control over. They make the other city-states that are a part of this league send them tax money and tribute to like maintain their defenses. And really it's just Athens is becoming a bully. And so Sparta will declare war on them as like, hey, stop this. I'm grossly oversimplifying, but we get this war between Sparta and Athens as a result of Athens kind of being a bully with the Delian League, and that's the Peloponnesian Wars. And ultimately, the effect of the Peloponnesian Wars is that both sides end up coming out losers. Greece is basically going to descend into political, like, unimportance until Alexander the Great comes along. So Alexander the Great is going to come along, and he comes along and he is born in 356 BCE, and he will die like 30 to 33 years later. He dies very young. He comes from a region called Macedon, sometimes pronounced Macedon, and he conquers a vast amount of territory in his 32 years of life. He is important really because as he goes out into the world and he conquers most of like the known world at this point, I mean, his empire extends from Egypt. It extends all the way around Turkey and the Mediterranean. It goes into India and Afghanistan. It's just absolutely huge. He is going to bring Greek culture with him wherever his army expands. And so, Samuel, you can watch this again and write down everything that you need to write down. So I wouldn't sweat that too much. But as Alexander the Great's army expands and conquers, he brings his Greek culture with him wherever he goes. And so this results in what we call syncretism happening quite a bit. As Alexander's Greek culture, he brings Greek philosophy, the Greek gods, Greek art and architecture with him wherever he goes. That's going to blend with the local cultures, and you're going to get a lot of syncretic art, syncretic philosophy. One of the best examples of this is going to be like Greco-Buddhism, because Buddhism has already evolved at this point. And you're going to see like statues of the Buddha, of Siddhartha Gautama, that look like they're carved like an ancient Greek statue would be. But you'll see those all over Afghanistan, at least you will until the Taliban destroys most of them. So this syncretic Hellenistic cultural spread that we're going to get in this time is the biggest legacy that Alexander the Great leaves. And again, Hellenistic, think Hellenistic, just means Greek or related to Greece. So Alexander the Great, I'm not going to talk too much about him. He named like 70 plus cities after himself. So there's like over 70 cities in the world that will be called Alexandria. Probably the most important and the biggest of them is going to be Egypt's Alexandria, which will be the capital for a time. But after Alexander the Great dies, his empire splinters into several different smaller kingdoms because he's just not great at like establishing a legacy in terms of like passing on his empire to a single ruler. So his top generals are going to divide up the land that he conquered into smaller little territories. So his empire is going to be divided into the Ptolemaic kingdom, which will be like northern Africa, Egypt. You're going to have the Seleucid King Empire, which is going to be the next like Persian Empire. You're going to have the Kingdom of Pergamon, which is going to be where like Turkey and Greece are, and then the Kingdom of Macedon, which is where Greece was. And Rome will also come out. Not the Roman Empire will be developing around this time. Oh, my cat is back. All right, so moving on. Sorry, my cat is pretty cute. So the other effect that that Alexander the Great is going to have is that he's going to inspire Chandragupta Maurya, who was a young boy when Alexander invaded India. And Chandragupta Maurya is going to see Alexander the Great's war elephants, his massive army, and the legend goes that this first interaction with Alexander the Great is going to inspire Chandragupta Maurya to create his own empire when he gets older, and that will be the Mauryan Empire. Sorry guys, I'm getting thirsty. So let's see. I just want to make sure I don't miss anything important before I get to like Rome and stuff. Because this might be a good time to hop over to the Mauryan and the Indian people. Because we don't talk about India a lot in this class, but we should. Okay, so when we talk about the Mauryan Empire, which is the first of the two big Indian classical empires, they don't conquer all of India, but they conquer enough for it to be important. So they conquer mostly like the northern part of India, with the little southern tip of India being left independent. And the most important emperor in the Mauryan Empire, other than Chandragupta, would be Ashoka, who is that brutal warlord who converts to Buddhism after he has like a religious experience. Asher, I would honestly say you should know Indian history, especially because it's probably a weaker point for a lot of people. I would say you should at least get comfortable with it. There's some parts in the history that are less important, but like the stuff I'm about to talk about is pretty big deal, and you should probably know it. So Ashoka is Chandragupta Maurya's grandson. He converts to Buddhism after he's horrified by the carnage on a battlefield, and he becomes a major reason why Buddhism spreads, like, not just like beyond its birthplace in India, but just around Southeast Asia. It's really thanks to Ashoka that that Buddhism doesn't die out as a religion, honestly. Ashoka is going to pass a lot of laws. Hi, this is live. Hello. Hello, everyone. Ashoka is going to pass a lot of laws that he's going to put up around his empire in these like rock pillars, those stone edicts of Ashoka. Hello. And he is going to pass a lot of laws to protect the rights of, like, what I think is the most interesting are like the animal rights laws that he passes, because he is like a big, he's a vegetarian. He wants to promote the rights of animals. And so he's going to do a lot to push that in the classical period, which I think is kind of interesting. He is going to, that kingdom is going to be followed by the Gupta dynasty, the Gupta Empire, which will last from 240 to 590. And you should actually probably know that, Jessica, I'm not sure who you are, to be honest, based on your username. So thank you. Gupta Empire collapsing in 590 CE is a big part of the reason why the time period for the classical era. Okay, so you're spam. Gotcha. I think that's a spam account, guys. Sorry about that. That's why we end the classical period at 600, because that's right around when the last major classical empire collapses, the Gupta Empire. And they're brought down largely by invasions from people like the White Huns coming in from the north. So that's probably the extent to which you need to know them. All right. Moving right along. Okay, so Rome. I'm going to talk about Rome. All right. This is weird, guys. So Rome, I'm going to ignore those people. I'm going to talk about the ancient Roman Empire really fast. We'll talk about the Han Dynasty in China. So, with Rome, you're going to have two important phases. There's really technically three phases. One is the Roman Kingdom. The first is the Roman Kingdom. And then we get the Republic, which will last until roughly 44 BCE. And then we'll talk about that in 1 second, Gustavo. Actually, not in this video at all. I'm sorry. After Julius Caesar dies and his nephew Augustus Caesar takes over, we go from being a republic to an empire. So Rome is going to go through different phases of political rule. When they're a republic, they very much are modeling their form of government after, I guess we should say we model our form of government after their form of government. They have a Senate. People are elected to different bodies in the Senate. While it's mostly a rule by the aristocracy, there is some sort of voice for the people. They have a general assembly where lower class people are allowed to be elected to. They don't have a lot of power, but this, again, it's a move in the direction of representative government. All of that is basically done away with in the empire, and they just have the rule of an emperor. And sometimes they go through a lot of emperors and a very short succession of time. Rome is going to be a great example of like how a well-run empire will rise and fall. A lot of the common themes about empires in this time you will see in Rome. So the key concepts about how empires ran their territory, how they interacted with each other, what caused them to decline. Rome is a perfect case study for this. So in order to organize their subjects, these rulers are going to create administrative institutions, including governments, laws, and bureaucracies. They're going to have standardized laws across the empire to try and maintain order. They're going to have bureaucracies, so like governors with local leaders, and you're going to get smaller and smaller chunks of authority as time goes on. And, as the territory gets smaller, but that just helps keep things running smoothly. It helps make sure that the emperor in Rome will be able to handle an uprising or an invasion as soon as it happens, because he will have people on the ground right there ready to deal with it. And it's not going to, they're not going to have to like send a message to Rome that could take like 6 months. And by the time the message gets there, maybe the uprising has already been successful and there's a rebellion on your hands. So you need those local people in the, yeah, I think they are robots. I'm not going to design anyone any underwear with your logo on it. I'm very sorry about that. This is very frustrating to me. This is the first time this has happened in these videos, guys. I'm sorry. Rome is going to have a series of laws that are called the 12 tables, that'll, again, like just codify law all across the government or all across the empire. And they'll have a pretty elaborate legal system. Rome will also protect its empire using a variety of techniques. They'll use diplomacy, peaceful means of reaching out and dealing with neighboring civilizations. They'll have really well-established road systems, just like the Persians, that will be used mostly for the military to like get supplies from one place to another, but also to help traders travel from one place to another. When Christianity starts to spread, a lot of the missionaries, like people like Paul of Tarsus, will use the Roman roads and the Roman trading networks to travel more safely. They'll build walls to protect from invasions. Like this past summer, I went to go visit Hadrian's Wall in Britain, which is this huge wall they built in Britain to keep the like British tribes from conquering Roman Britain. And then another method that a lot of these civilizations will use is drawing their soldiers and even their military officers from the people that they conquer to try. Sorry, one of my friends is leaving.
Hi, Chad.
To try and help them feel a sense of involvement in the Roman society, to give them an option for Roman citizenship, to let them have like feel like they belong to the Roman Empire. Plus, it helps increase the number of people that can use your military. They're also going to develop currencies, standardized currencies, so that trade can be standardized. So just a lot of methods that they're going to use. Big cities are going to start to become more and more important. So you need to know these big imperial cities that are going to sprout up. Obviously, Rome is a great example. Athens is another good example. Alexandria in Egypt, like I mentioned. But you just need to know that these big imperial cities are where the governments are going to run out of. They're the big cities where the religions and like the biggest temples are going to be built out of. It's where the most trade is going to happen. It's where all the fun stuff is going to happen. The biggest coliseums and amphitheaters and theaters are going to be in these big imperial cities for entertainment purposes. Oh, here comes my cat again. Let's see. Rome is also going to be heavily reliant on slaves. And similarly to the Greeks, a lot of slaves in ancient Rome were actually very well educated. So you'll have sometimes like doctors who are actually slaves. You'll have teachers who are slaves, government administrators and advisors who are slaves. And often they would be allowed to save up and maybe work to earn their freedom. So it's a little different than like slavery as we're used to in the United States. where like slavery meant you were the bottom of the barrel, treated like property. A lot of slaves in Rome and Greece during this time are going to have pretty high social standing. They're just not going to have freedom. They're going to be tied to someone else, and they're going to have to work for someone else for free. Rome is a very patriarchal society. Actually, patriarchy, the word patriarchy, comes from the Latin for father, pater, Pater. So this whole concept of patriarchy, we get it from the Latin word for father. And in Rome, I mean, the husbands, the pater familias, who was the head of the household, had power of life and death over the people in his household. So his wife, his children, their spouses, if his children were adults, but also like slaves, servants, anyone living in the household, he could decide if they needed to be punished by death. Like he had the total right to execute people under his authority. And now that wasn't exercised very often. Like for the most part, they didn't go around like killing their children. But it was a legal right given to the heads of the household, who were always men. So that's, you know, in terms of society, women in Rome were allowed to go out of their homes. They didn't have to be veiled all the time. So there was a little more freedom, but still very patriarchal. And so Rome is going to collapse, you know, due to a variety of reasons. One of these reasons, they overextend their borders. They're not going to be able to maintain their borders as much as, you know, they probably should be able to. A lot of the generals that get promoted within their army are going to be not loyal at all to Rome. Many of them won't even speak Latin. And so you're going to slowly see like the standards of the military decline. You're going to see the loyalties in the military decline. You're going to have a series of corrupt leaders in Rome, some really corrupt emperors. So Asher, the Western Roman Empire collapses in 476 CE. It had been in serious steep decline before that, but it collapses. Western Rome collapses in 476. So the Roman Empire before that split in 284. Emperor Diocletian split the empire in two. He moved into the eastern half, which would become the Byzantine Empire after the Western Roman Empire collapses. Yes, Timothy, they will also have their economy will also suffer. Largely, probably because they spend too much money on the military and they're not getting enough out of it. But yeah, money is going to be a big problem at the end of this time period, at the end of the empire. So in 284, the empire splits. You get Eastern Rome, Western Rome. Eastern Rome is going to start to be where all the wealth is, where all the power is. Basically from 284 to 476, that last like 100, 200 years about. Western Rome is going to be a backwater civilization, nothing like what we think of as the Roman Empire. It's poor. They're being invaded all the time. The emperors are super corrupt. And the Eastern Roman Empire is going to be very powerful. It's going to be very wealthy. It's where all the trade is going to be happening at this point. They're going to be that beautiful mix of Greek and Latin culture. Corruption's absolutely going to play a role in it. The emperors are just going to, you know, have less and less authority. A lot of times you're just going to have generals declaring themselves emperor, even though, you know, no one respects their authority. And the power of the emperor's position is going to decline very drastically. Disease is going to play a role in this. Diseases that are transmitted along these major trade routes like the Silk Roads and the Mediterranean Sea trade routes. Those are going to get a lot of people sick, and that is not going to help matters. Wealth inequality is going to be a real problem in Rome, and that's not going to help matters. And finally, ultimately, it will be invasions that bring Rome down. We don't know what tribe it was that ultimately conquered Rome, but we know that we're invaded by groups like the Huns, the Visigoths, the Gauls. So, you know, it's just a matter of which one of them possibly was the last one to invade. So after 476, Rome The Roman Empire will still exist, but again, it's the Byzantine Empire now, and their culture is very different. They do some of the stuff the same. They adopt the laws of the Western Roman Empire. They do a lot of the same culture. So they've got like the amphitheaters and the horse races and things that the ancient Western Romans had, but they're going to be a lot more Greek. They're going to practice a different form of Christianity. They're going to practice Orthodox Christianity rather than what becomes Roman Catholicism. And yeah, it's going to be just a very different culture. Doop-de-doo-doo. All right, I've got about one more empire in me right now, so I'm going to do the Han Dynasty because I'm getting real tired. So I'm actually going to start with the Qin Dynasty, because the Qin Dynasty is in this period as well. The Qin Dynasty, Qin, is the first imperial dynasty that we have where China kind of looks like modern China. Prior to that, China was way, way, way smaller, and we don't really consider them an empire yet. But the Qin Dynasty will be the first imperial dynasty. It lasts from 221 to 206. And it's, so before I continue, I'll answer Nathaniel's question. The Roman Empire, so to be completely honest, the term Byzantine is a phrase that's applied to the Eastern Roman Empire by later scholars. So there's never going to be an official, like, new management sign where, like, hey guys, we're not Rome anymore, we're the Byzantines. That's going to be a term that's going to be applied to them later by other people. So they're always going to consider themselves to be the Roman Empire, the only one left after 476. We're going to apply a different title to them later on because we recognize that there's something different about them. But they think of themselves as Roman. So there's a couple of qualities about the Qin Dynasty that you need to know. The first one is that this is the first empire with the first emperor. Shi Huangdi is going to call himself the first emperor of China. And he is going to do a lot in terms of like consolidating control of China. So he's going to be a legalist. And remember, legalism is going to show up just in a few dynasties. The Qin Dynasty and the Sui Dynasty are going to be the two that are really legalist. Also, the two that are the shortest, because legalism doesn't last very long. It's very brutal, it's very harsh, and people overthrow it pretty easily. But it's good for establishing order after a period of chaos. So again, Qin and Sui are going to come after a period of warring states. They're going to use legalism to get the empire back together, and then once people have had enough of the legalism, they're going to overthrow those dynasties and get something a little nicer. Qin Shi Huangdi, who is again the first emperor, is going to do a lot of the same things these other imperial rulers are going to do. He's going to build roads. He's going to divide China into provinces, so have that bureaucracy. He's going to begin the Great Wall of China. Now, it's not going to be finished until much later, but he's going to first lay the foundations for it. He's the one who burns the books. He sentences Confucian scholars to death. Like, he's super rough. He's not a fun guy. But he will standardize the laws. He will standardize the currency and get all of China on the same currency and the same like weights and measures so that China's trade can be organized. And he's going to, again, bring China back together so that we can have the Han Dynasty, which will be a lot better. This is one of the golden periods of Chinese history, the Han Dynasty. And the Han Dynasty lasts way longer. The Han Dynasty lasts from 206 BC to 220 AD. So that's 400 years, roughly. So it's a long-lasting civilization. Golden age of China, often compared to ancient Rome because they exist around the same time. They're going to have a lot of the same characteristics. They're going to collapse for a lot of the same reasons. So So they're going to be ruled by Confucian values, and they're also going to adopt that mandate of heaven ideology that says, the emperor is emperor because he's been given the mandate of heaven and he has been blessed by heaven. And if the emperor does the wrong thing, the heavens will revoke that mandate, and you'll know because bad things will start to happen, like floods or famines or disease or things like that. Let's see. The Han emperors are going to expand the territory. They're going to start to interact with the nomadic tribes on the border. Again, I've mentioned to my students that I'm pretty sure the movie Mulan takes place in the Han Dynasty. Just there's a couple of clues in the movie that cue me into that. But especially like the relationship with the nomadic tribes on the border. Do you mean like when I said, okay, so I'll answer Francisco's question first. The mandate of heaven is not the same thing that we use to expand west. That's manifest destiny, but it's kind of similar. It's the same. It's this idea of like, it's our destiny to have this power over people. But the mandate of heaven is going to be specifically for Chinese emperors, and not like Western like United States settlers. And Ayana, when I said adopt, I meant that like Confucianism and the mandate of heaven were around before the Qin dynasty, but the Qin emperors kind of did away with both of those for the time being, so they're going to pick them back up. They didn't get them from anybody else. It was always a Chinese thing, but they did like pick it back up, might be a better phrase. Let's see. China during the Han Dynasty is going to engage very much in trade on the Silk Roads, which is funny because in Confucian society, merchants are looked down upon. They're the bottom level of society because remember, they don't. Yes, Timothy, that's a much better comparison. Divine Right of Kings and like European history is a much better comparison. So in China, like I said, the merchants are considered to be the bottom of society because they don't create anything. They just make money off of what other people have created. So they're going to be, bottom level of society here and in Japan. Once places like Japan and Korea adopt Chinese culture, merchants are going to drop in social status there too. It's under the Han Dynasty where we really start to see a huge increase in the civil service exam system, which is kind of cultural, kind of political, kind of social, because like technically, in theory, any young man could take the test and pass it and get, a high up position in society. But in the Han Dynasty, really in practice, you're only going to see those civil service positions going from like father to son. It's not going to be until later dynasties where we're going to start to make efforts to really help poor peasant boys get a leg up in the system. So while in theory it allows for a lot of social mobility, you're really not going to see that just yet. It's political because these scholars are going to be kind of the administrators of the government. They're advisors to the emperor. They're going to help run the government. And it's cultural because the exams are based on Confucian teachings. Like how well can these young men apply Confucian principles to government issues? So it's that intersection of spice, the civil service exam. You're going to see it in some way, shape, or form on the AP test. Because it also, like, it's such a continuity for Chinese history. It exists in almost all of the dynasties in some form or another. So it's a great continuity for Chinese history. All right, let's see. Very patriarchal society. Lots of new inventions. Compass will be invented under the Han Dynasty. Rudders for ships. So acupuncture is going to start to be used as like a form of medicine. And I've heard really great things about acupuncture. I've never used it, but I've heard it's actually very effective. It's not really going to change the economy too much. Again, especially at this point, because while it theoretically allows social movement, it's not going to have much practical social movement. So you're not going to see a lot of practical economic effects of the civil service exam on the economy. At least not yet. Han culture, there's going to be a lot of calligraphy art, jade carvings. Again, think like the statues in Mulan, the art on the walls, the calligraphy writing on the walls. Acupuncture as a form of medicine is going to be developed, like I said. And again, you know, with the decline of the Han Dynasty, part of it's going to be due to invasions of the people, the nomads on their borders. China has a really weird relationship with the nomads on their borders. They'll be invaded a ton of times. Twice will the nomads overthrow the Chinese government and create new dynasties. You'll have that with the Mongols and then the Qing dynasty. Those are both dynasties that are established by nomads invading China. But even when they're not invading and conquering, they're still going to be causing a lot of problems. And they will be responsible for bringing down the Han Dynasty as well. So the main nomadic tribe you should know for the Han Dynasty is the Shan Yu. Again, sounds like the name of the villain in Mulan for a reason. But it's not spelled that way. It's spelled Xiongnu. They're going to be like the biggest threat to the Han Dynasty. The Han will have overextended their borders just like the Romans did. Land corruption in the leadership is going to be a problem with the Han and the Romans. Diseases that spread into the society thanks to the Silk Road trade is going to be a problem in the Han and the Roman dynasty. And ultimately, you know, they will collapse. Let's see. All right. It's been over an hour. You guys have done great following along with me. Do you have any questions? I know I covered this very quickly, but I am kind of getting tired, and also I want to know if you guys need anything from me in terms of knowledge that you haven't gotten. All right, I know there's a bit of a lag, so I'll give it a minute. Also, I think you just saw my husband walk through. So that's my husband. Oh, thanks, Timothy. I'm trying to figure out when the next one can be. I'm thinking Saturday afternoon maybe, which I know isn't like ideal, but that way we can like, I don't know, I'm just trying to think about when I'm available, when you guys would be available. But I'll bring it up in class maybe tomorrow and see what people think. In terms of the most important period of China's history, there's so many. I could tell you probably what the least important periods are. The shorter dynasties. So the Shang dynasty is probably not as important. The Zhou dynasty, the Qin dynasty. Han is important. The Tang and Song dynasties are important. The Yuan dynasty is important. The Qing like it's all important. I'm sorry, guys. Chinese, it's like AP Chinese history up in here. Yeah, Sayayana, I'm gonna be partying Saturday night. It's my goddaughter's birthday, and I'm gonna be going over to Orlando to be with my goddaughter. And Sunday is Mother's Day. So I'll feel it out. I'll see what might work for as many people as possible. But again, you can also watch these later, so that's good too. All right, so there's still more stuff to cover for period 2. I didn't really talk a lot about, you know, getting crunk with a 2-year-old. I guess she's 3 now. Oh my God. No, she's 2. I really need to know how. Yeah, you do need to get a gift for your mother. I still need to talk about like Mesoamerica with the Mayans. We haven't really talked a lot about the religions yet. So I'm going to try and get all that information to you guys as effectively as possible. But I'm tired right now, and you guys have been here for a long time, and I'm sure you've got other stuff to do. So I'm going to let you guys go, and I'm going to wrap this up. So thank you guys for hanging out. Doop-doo-doo-doo.